Well, hello, America. I'm going to be shoot real straight with you. I haven't found a guy that I can possibly support for president yet. I've begun my search, and I've got a few of them that I like, a few of them I really don't like. I'm going to spend the next few months looking for somebody that I can vote for. I'll tell you that there are a few things. There's actually 5 things that are important to me, and I'll spell them out as we go along. Mike Huckabee says he is the only true conservative in the presidential race and the GOP's best chance to beat Hillary Clinton in 08. Tonight, you decide if he's your guy, as I decide if he's my guy. Governor Huckabee, welcome to the program. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Glenn. Thanks for having me.
We talked a little bit in the green room before we came out,
yeah.
And I just want to have a real conversation with you because I think Americans are sick to death of politicians. I feel my audience, and I can speak for me, we're disenfranchised from politicians on both sides of the aisle. We don't think that they're even listening to us. We don't think anybody is fighting this war to win. I feel like taxes beyond, in biblical proportions are coming our way. Yeah. And we seem to think that every single politician does whatever the heck they want when they get in. Do you feel the disenfranchisement happening in America?
Absolutely, Glenn. I really do. And I think it's especially acute right now in the Republican Party. When I was on stage with some of those other candidates the other night in the debate that we did with one of those other networks, one of the things that struck me when they were talking about the economy, they were talking about how great it was, how wonderful it was. And I'll be honest with you, look, if you look at 22 consecutive quarters of economic growth, yes, it's doing great. The macro economy is doing terrific. But if you talk to cab drivers, if you talk to the people who are not necessarily making headlines, but the people who are really working hard to put food on their table, they do not feel that it's going great. Now, I'll tell you the worst thing that can happen, raise taxes. And if you raise taxes, you're going to further create a huge decline. And it's going to create another level of disparity between the folks in the ruling class and the people who are becoming an increasingly, basically a servant class.
But this is where the disenfranchisement is. You can say that about taxes,
yeah.
And yet half of the country won't even look at the fact on our revenue intake. Half of this country still says tax cuts are bad when the proof is there that it's not. It's the spending that's out of control. So how do you even unite this country back together when we've been pushed off to the sides and we're told that we have to hate the other side? How do you knit it back together when you can't even agree on truth?
The biggest challenge we face in this country is what you just mentioned. It is that politics has become completely horizontal. Everything is left, right, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican. Politics ought to be vertical. And when people get elected, they ought to be asking, are we going to lift people up and this country up, or are we going to take it down? And that's regards to infrastructure, roads and bridges, the war, the economy, education, health care. Take a topic. The average American doesn't care who fixes it, but the average American is very frustrated that once people are elected, they go back into this polarizing left-right stuff. It's not about us helping do something that solves a problem. It's making sure the other guys come out losing and our side comes out winning. And there's no doubt that people are tired of that. I think we've got some big problems. It's going to take some big ideas to fix them. We talked about taxes. Look, tinkering with the tax code, waste of our time. All it does is create a few winners and a lot of losers. The only thing that really, to me, makes sense is scrap the tax system completely. Okay. Go to the fair tax.
I want to get to you on the taxes, and I want to get into specifics here in just a second. I just want to. I need to hear from you on a couple of things.
Okay.
One, that you truly get the disenfranchisement. I have had people call me, and I've been in broadcast now 30 years.
Yeah.
I have never heard this country like it is now. I have never heard people call me up, normal people.
Yeah.
I went to Texas in a 24-hour period. I think I had five or six guys come up to me, normal, suit, dressed like you, and say, when do we have to grab our guns and take our country back?
Yeah.
In a 24-hour period. I lived in Texas for a while, never heard that. People are living on the edge, and they don't trust. Now, let's start with just the GOP.
Right.
I'm a recovering alcoholic, Governor. I mean, I know if you can't point to a place in your life where you say, that is the point to where I had to change or it would have been death, you haven't changed. I haven't heard that pivot point from the GOP. I haven't heard them stand up and say, Jesus, forgive me, because boy, did we screw up. Where's their bottom? Why should we trust the GOP?
I don't know that you should trust the GOP. I think the GOP has got a lot of problems. I'm a Republican, want to stay that way. But frankly, far more important to me than the party itself are the principles that made me a Republican. Look, I didn't grow up Republican. I grew up in South Arkansas. There weren't any Republicans in Hope, Arkansas when I grew up there.
I mean, it's another guy from Hope.
Yeah, I know, but it's a different guy from Hope. It's a different guy. Different views, different everything. But the fact is, I became a Republican out of conviction. I believe in the sanctity of life. I believe in lower taxes, more local government. There are some basic things that caused me to say, look, I need to be a Republican. When the Republican Party abandons those principles, they abandon me.
Where did the train go off the tracks?
First of all, the spending issue. Second of all, incompetence. They haven't managed things well. Third, there's been a complete indifference to corruption. If you really want to make the American people mad, let them think that you're going to run on this platform of reform and integrity and honor, and then when you get there, you have just as many problems with corruption as the other guys. You don't seem to be able to snuff it out or to stand against it very firm. You want to blame everybody else for the problems. You don't stop the spending. When something of cataclysmic proportion happens, like Katrina, look, we bungled that. We just flat bungled it. Every level of government did, but I saw it firsthand. We had 75,000 people coming up from New Orleans in my state. State's population in Arkansas increased by 3% in 5 days. And we saw how those people had literally been abandoned out there. Now, look, I'm not one of these that say, look, it's all the government's fault, they got to take care of it. But I saw how the government could have done things and how they miserably failed, and then wouldn't even own up to the way that they could have fixed it.
Well, then help me. If you are indeed a conservative, help me here.
All right.
When did we become a nation of people that stand on our roof with signs that say, help me?
That's not what I'm fussing about. I'm fussing about the fact that when the government at the federal level could have turned some things over to states and say, make some decisions at the local level, we pulled everything back to a bottlenecked government in Washington. One of the biggest mistakes we ever made was creating an overly large Homeland Security Department that handles both terror acts and natural disasters. You approach them completely differently. FEMA ought to be a standalone entity, because when you deal with a terrorist attack, then you have a crime scene. You've got to preserve evidence. You need to be looking at ways in order to preserve the integrity of the evidence that you are dealing with, because you're trying to bring people to justice. When you have a tornado or you have a hurricane or an ice storm, it's a completely different set of rules. Then it's not about preserving evidence. It's about preserving property and people and providing as much safety as you can.
How do you change Homeland Security? How do you take this? I mean, both sides are running towards bigger government all the time. We're practically the Soviet Union.
Move those decisions back to the local governments. Look, Thomas Jefferson was right.
How do you do it? I know he was,
he
but
was right.
Nobody reads this stuff anymore. Nobody knows the Constitution.
The Republicans aren't reading it, and that's the problem.
Exactly right.
The Republicans, and look, with all due respect, under this administration, we've become more Hamiltonian. I almost see the ghost of Alexander Hamilton coming up out of the grave, taking the federal government over. And I want to say, excuse me, we had this debate 230 years ago. Jefferson won. We have weak federal system, strong states, not the other way around. What we don't want in this country is to have an overly centralized federal government where everything has to go, and then you have very weak states that have to raise their hand and ask permission.
So how do you correct this? I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this. 26 states now have secessionist movements in them.
Well, I'm not advocating secession.
No, I understand that. How do you reset it?
Part of it is the president needs to set a tone, first of all, to remind people what they should have learned in 9th grade civics, and that is that federalism is the law and the policy of the land, and the 10th Amendment ought to mean something. But then secondly, the president needs to lead the Congress in helping to get back to the place where we realize what federalism really means. And it's not to bring everything tightly into Washington. That's what we've done. The results are disastrous. We're seeing it in everything from tax policy. We're seeing it in the way that we approach, even the way in which the National Guard troops are utilized. As a governor, I saw this for 10.5 years, and it's getting worse with every single year.
Okay, right back with presidential politics. We're not playing hardball. We're actually having a conversation with Governor Mike Huckabee. Back in a second.